Today we're making a week's worth of meals for 2 people on a budget. We have 2 adults with 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, which comes to 42 meals. We ended up spending $85 at the grocery store, which brings the per serving price to about $2.02. Wherever you live in the world, you may end up spending more or less, so use this as more of a template. Something important to note about this budget meal plan is that these meals are all nutritionally balanced. I didn't want to do the most extreme budget that I possibly could. I just wanted to give an example of how I, as a clinical nutritionist, approach eating well on a budget, which means you're going to get fat, fiber, protein, and carbohydrates. Let's just go over some of the ingredients. As you can see, this was an excellent haul. Now, some of the things that I did not include in this grocery haul or in the overall budget include olive oil and some of the pantry spices that I used. We also happen to have some broccoli sprouts, and they won't last a whole week in the fridge, so we threw them on top of a few of our meals, not really included and totally optional. Okay, so for day 1, we actually started with oatmeal. Zach made us some mashed banana oatmeal, which we topped with some of the seed mix, some almond butter, and some fresh blueberries to make sure that we were getting enough fat and protein. I usually recommend making it with a milk that is high in protein, such as dairy milk or soy milk, but we decided not to include that in the budget and instead use the seed mix and the almond butter. And then it was time to start meal prepping. Nowadays, I just try to cook a few recipes ahead of time and then save some of the faster things for during the week, and maybe I'll meal prep as I'm going. So whenever I'm including a whole chicken in a meal prep, I always start there because that way I can cook the chicken, eat it fresh, have tons of leftovers throughout the week, and turn the bones into bone broth, which in this case, we'll be using in a stew later in the week. For this recipe, I'm actually just cooking it over a mixture of onions and carrots, so we have some nice vegetables that will get flavored by the drippings of the chicken. I'm making a little bit of a garlic butter here. Rub that all over the chicken and then season it with salt, pepper, and whatever dried herbs that you have. I will say salt and pepper is perfectly acceptable here as well, but we just happen to have these herbs, so they're totally optional. And then on a separate baking sheet, I'm also going to roast some potatoes, and I'm going to roast some broccoli. I've worked on many different budget projects over the last 10 years, and I almost always include a whole chicken. The reason for this is it's one of the most affordable sources of animal protein, and it is a concentrated form of many nutrients, including amino acids. It's also pretty easy to put together, and the really interesting thing about white potatoes is that when you cook them and cool them, they develop resistant starch, which becomes food for our gut bacteria and also slows down the blood sugar response in the body. For the next recipe that I am meal prepping, I'm doing a frittata. I'm making some homemade sausage, so I've got half a pound of the ground pork and I'm seasoning it up myself. Then we're gonna add in different vegetables, so I'm using some green onion, bell pepper, kale, and I'm definitely gonna use these kale stems as well. We're gonna cook all of those ingredients, and then since the oven situation is limited, it's gonna become a stovetop frittata. Now, you may or may not know that in this house, we don't have a real oven. So we stayed in this Airbnb in Scotland for 4 months when I was filming this, and we had one of those countertop microwave convection ovens, which was bigger than the microwave that we have here, but it had a convection oven setting, so you could actually cook and roast things in it, but it was still very small, and it wasn't great for meal prep, which is why I don't have a lot of oven things in this meal plan. Now, if you do have a regular oven, this is actually much easier in the oven, but we're working with what we've got here. Before pouring the egg mixture in here, I am gonna add a good amount of butter. Of course, this will add flavor and a form of fat, but it will also help make it easier to remove the frittata later. I have done this in carbon steel pans and cast iron pans, but when you're doing it on the stovetop, it becomes harder to flip. We're gonna add the eggs, let that cook, and then once it's close to being set, you can actually flip it. You might make a mess, but I don't mind that much as long as nothing gets wasted. So you wanna find a way to flip that onto a plate, then slide that back in so you can cook the other side as well. And we're going to do some hash browns with this frittata. Again, I would usually just make up some extra roasted potatoes, but because of the limited oven space, I'm just gonna do some hash browns. Eggs are a super affordable form of protein, and we're pairing them with even more protein by using half a pound of ground pork here, as well as numerous different vegetables with 3 different colors. So we're doing bell pepper, green onion, and kale. For the next recipe, we're doing spicy lentil lettuce wraps. Lentils are another amazing budget-friendly ingredient. They have protein and tons of fiber, and you can usually get a pound of dried lentils for $1 to $2. I developed this recipe back when we lived in Peru. We ate some version of this almost every week because lentils were abundant and even cheaper there. But I've tweaked it over the years, and I recently updated it on my blog as well to reflect some of these changes. I selected red onions this week because I wanted to be able to use them in raw, pickled, and cooked forms. By getting a red onion, I was also able to get some additional phytonutrients by adding in something from another color group. This is really easy to pull together. Essentially, we're just going to cook together some onion, shredded carrots, lentils with different seasonings and spices, and some canned tomatoes. You can also use fresh tomatoes for this, but canned tomatoes were much cheaper. So I also purchased some spicy peppers from the store. These are Thai bird's eye chilies, which is what we had, but jalapeno or habanero or serrano would also work. You can also use red pepper flakes instead. And as a side note, if you're not sure if you like lentils, I highly recommend this recipe. We're just gonna stuff this flavorful lentil mixture into some lettuce wraps.
1 little slice for each little guy.
Add citrus, whatever you have. I had lemon this week, but you could always use lime. Top it off with avocado, which we made sure to include in the budget for this recipe, and enjoy.
So good.
Yeah, that's good.
An easy way to pack in a ton of flavor for a low cost is to add in these punchy pickled red onions. Thinly slice the onions, add them to a jar, fill it about halfway with apple cider vinegar, and then top it off with some boiling water. You can always add salt or sugar or different herbs and spices, but I kept it pretty simple. Add the lid and let it sit at room temperature for a couple of hours. Soon it becomes this gorgeous pink color, and then you can store it in the fridge to use all week long. So for lunch on this day, we had these spicy lentil lettuce wraps, which were amazing. And then for dinner, we just ate the whole chicken dinner that I prepared with chicken, potatoes, carrots, onions, and roasted broccoli. At the end of the day, Zach pulled all of the chicken meat off of the bones, and then we added that to a large pot. I covered it with water, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and let that simmer on a very low simmer overnight. Then in the morning, we had a pot of 12-hour chicken bone broth. Okay, that's it for day 1. The next day for breakfast, we had the leftover frittata with some of the leftover hash browns and a couple of clementines each. For lunch, I made this really easy tuna salad. Essentially, I just took a can of tuna, mixed it with the hummus, which is nice because not only does it give you some fat and some protein, but it's already seasoned, so it's a little bit of a shortcut here. I also added in some of the liquid from the pickled onions and turned these into open-faced tuna toasts with some of the other veggies we had on hand. I mixed in some grated carrots for some extra color and topped those with sliced grape tomatoes, pickled onions, and some cucumbers. I also added some of those extra broccoli sprouts that we had, and on the side we split a banana with some almond butter. And I recommend skipjack tuna. Skipjack is a smaller species of fish, so it's naturally much lower in mercury than something like albacore. When I was done working, I decided to meal prep a batch of this white bean stew for later in the week before cooking dinner. And this recipe is from Rainbow Plant Life, and I've linked to it below. For this white bean stew recipe, we'll use the 2 cans of cannellini beans, as well as some of the kale, the green bell pepper, one of the potatoes, some of the red onion, carrots, garlic, some spices, and some of the canned tomatoes that I saved from when I made the spicy lentil lettuce wraps. We're also using that chicken bone broth, which I made overnight. If you don't have that, you can use water or maybe vegetable broth or a bouillon cube. For this recipe, Nisha also makes a gremolata, which is made from salt, lemon zest, basil, and I think also garlic. I just kind of used what I had on hand to make some version of that so that we could try it out that way. But I do think it's optional. I just happen to have a basil plant. Realistically, as long as you finish this off with some fresh lemon juice, you'll be getting a lot of the same flavors and it will still taste really good. All right, moving on to day 2's dinner. We made easy ground pork stir fry, which is the most popular recipe on my blog. I've also linked to the video here. And essentially, I started by cooking up some of the brown rice. Then I started prepping all of the vegetables and stir fried all of that together with the ½ pound of ground pork. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that I had that tamari in my budget. This is something you may also have on hand, so you might not have to pay extra for, or you might have a substitute that you prefer. We served the easy ground pork stir fry with brown rice, a little bit of butter on the rice, and that was day 2. Welcome to day 3. For breakfast on day 3, I made a sort of veggie hash with red onion, red bell pepper, zucchini, and some black beans. I also roasted up some sweet potatoes, and I topped that with some fried eggs, avocado, cilantro, and lemon juice. We had enough for 2 days worth of breakfasts here. I also took the opportunity to rinse and soak the dried chickpeas so I could have them cooked and ready to go for meals later in the week. Lunch was easy. We just heated up some of the white bean stew, which I had cooked the night before. And for dinner, we also kept it pretty simple. We essentially had some of the leftovers from the whole chicken dinner, but I kind of zhuzhed it up with some quinoa, which I cooked fresh for dinner, and then added some arugula and hummus. And again, we topped this with some of those broccoli sprouts that would otherwise be going bad in the fridge. For day 4, we had leftovers all day, so breakfast was the rest of the frittata and the hash browns with some clementines. For lunch, we had the other 2 servings of the spicy lentil lettuce wraps with avocado, and on this day I added some pickled red onions. And for dinner, we finished off the ground pork stir fry. I also wanted a little variety here, so we added some of the arugula, and I put a fried egg on top. And after dinner on this day, I also made some banana oat chocolate chip cookies. I know some people will complain that mashed banana plus oats does not equal a cookie, but we love these actually, and they're super, super simple. And when you're on a budget, it's a great thing to have on hand, so just ignore the haters. I mashed up 2 bananas and mixed those with some of the rolled oats, and then I chopped up some of this chocolate bar and added that in, along with some of the seed mix to make it a little bit more filling. I have made this before. This is based on a downshiftology recipe, which is linked below, so you can check it out. But we really like these, and since we didn't have a real oven in this apartment, these were actually perfect because you don't need any leavener and there isn't really a chemical reaction happening. It's kind of like a baked oatmeal with some chocolate. On day 5, we started seeing a few new meals again. I did plan on doing a smoothie for breakfast, but the cheapo immersion blender that I had was just not blending up this kale at all, so I scratched that, and instead we had some yogurt bowls with some of the seed mix and blueberries, a slice of toast, hummus, cucumbers, sprouts. We also split a banana with almond butter and then had some sauteed kale mixed with some of those chickpeas that I had made earlier in the week. This worked out great and was still satisfying, but if you wanted to turn most of those ingredients into a smoothie, you could do that instead. Lunch on this day was super simple again. We just heated up the rest of the leftover white bean stew. It was perfect for lunch and super simple. For dinner, I made the healthy dairy-free butter chicken, which is a recipe on my blog. But to stretch the budget, I decreased the amount of chicken I used and added in the cooked chickpeas. This recipe is really very simple and it's quite popular, so you'll see a video for that coming soon. Although I usually prefer Indian cuisine with white rice, we bought brown rice this week, so we served this with some of the brown rice that I had cooked for the easy ground pork stir fry. By day 6, things were starting to get a little bit lean. We finished up the veggie hash with the black beans for breakfast, And then I also had some random leftovers. I had a little bit of cabbage and some carrots left over, so I turned that into a carrot cabbage slaw. We used the rest of the chicken that was left over from the whole chicken dinner, and I served that with some quinoa, hummus, and pickled red onion. So this is a great example of a meal that I didn't really plan ahead with a whole recipe, but I knew that I was going to have some extra ingredients in different categories, and so I was able to throw that all together into a meal for 2 people. And for dinner, we made baked lentil falafels, which is based on the Pinch of Yum recipe, and then the cucumber tomato salad and the garlicky yogurt. You can find those recipes on my blog on the lamb gyro post. And I made these lemon garlic potato wedges, which came out super, super good with the rest of the potatoes that we had. So we kind of combined this all together to make this baked falafel sort of plate. We also had a little bit of leftover lettuce. I will say a dinner like this is sometimes a little bit light on the protein, but fortunately we had this Greek yogurt as the sauce, which does add some protein to the overall meal, and this was filling for us. And that was it for day 6. Okay, day 7 is here. For breakfast, we did overnight oats, so we were totally out of eggs and a lot of the other ingredients, so we made overnight oats using Greek yogurt, oats, a little bit of water, and we had a touch of coconut milk left over, so we mixed that in as well. We stirred in some almond butter, and then we topped it with what we had left, which was some of the seed mix and sliced banana. For lunch, we finished off the baked falafel meal with the potato wedges, and we also had some quinoa left over, so I threw that into the mix as well. For our last meal of the week, we finished off the healthy butter chicken with the chickpeas and the rest of the brown rice. I completely forgot to record anything for this last meal, but you saw it earlier. Okay, and that was 42 different servings of food. And while you didn't see any snacks, I did want to point out that although I'm not much of a snacker, Zach does snack throughout the day. We had that gluten-free loaf of bread, so he was able to make toast with butter or almond butter. We had some extra bananas on hand, and obviously that seed mix, as well as some of those banana oat chocolate cookies, and that was enough for him to snack on throughout the week. I hope these recipes gave you some good ideas to help you eat well on a budget. As always, thank you for being here. I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below letting me know if you're going to make any of these recipes. See you in the next video. I hope you found these, I hope these recipes give you some great, oh my God. All right. Okay.